Hey everyone, welcome back to Latina ADHD Podcast Season 2. I am super excited. I am Dr. Janice Castro, a licensed psychologist and your host. Just as a reminder, this podcast and this episode is not a replacement for therapy. However, I do appreciate y'all listening. So, have you ever felt like you're just pretending to be good at something and that any minute someone's going to find out that you're actually not good at it, that you're actually a fraud? Or maybe you've questioned if you're even good enough to be doing what you're doing right now. Today, we'll be talking about imposter phenomenon. You may have heard it as imposter syndrome. Most people call it that. And I'm going to break down why I choose to say imposter phenomenon and why I would encourage you to say imposter phenomenon over imposter syndrome. I can't tell you how to talk, but I can share some wealth of knowledge and maybe plant some seeds. And I also want to acknowledge how imposter phenomenon shows up for folks with ADHD. So I'm going to break it down, try to make it a little fun and easy. So why do I choose imposter phenomenon over imposter syndrome? When you recognize the word syndrome, it means that it is some kind of disease. Syndrome is when a bunch of symptoms or signs are happening all together, and it means that a person has some kind of condition or illness. Having imposter phenomenon is not an illness. There's nothing wrong with you. Now, if you say imposter phenomenon, then you're not saying I have an illness. There is something wrong with me. You are saying there is this experience that I am having and it exists and I see it, I notice it, but it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. So phenomenon is something that happens or exists that people can see or notice. And maybe you're not fully understanding why it's happening. It could be something that people study, which actually they do. There is people out there who do research on imposter phenomenon. So what is it? Imposter phenomenon, I'll give you an example. I like sports, so I'm going to use the sports analogy. Soccer is one of my favorite sports. Imagine joining a soccer team where all the uniforms, cleats, and gear are made for players with much bigger feet and longer legs. The coach gives instructions assuming everyone already knows certain plays, but no one ever taught them to you. You start to feel like you're not good enough to be on the team, even though the real issue is that everything was designed for a different type of player, not you. Imposter phenomenon is when you feel like you don't deserve your achievements, even when you've worked really hard for them. You may have a bunch of certifications, diplomas, and you're feeling like you have a mask on and you're afraid that someone's going to pull it off and say, aha, you don't really belong here. You don't really fit in. And the truth is you do belong, even if you don't feel like you fit in. People with imposter phenomenon often think that their success maybe is just luck, or that you tricked people into thinking that you're smart or good enough. And no matter how much you accomplish, you still feel like you're not good enough. And you keep overworking yourself so that one day you do feel like you're good enough. Does that sound familiar? Well, we're going to unpack it and we're going to figure out how to deal with it. I'm going to give y'all some tips, okay? So first, I want to talk about the 5 types of imposter phenomenon, because not all imposter phenomenon looks the same. Some of the examples I just gave, it may not resonate with you, and that's okay, because maybe one of these 5 do. There's the perfectionist. That is number 1. You focus only on mistakes. You keep getting a little bit perfectionist in like the tiny mistakes, and you feel like a failure if things are not 100% perfect. you may engage in a lot of black and white thinking. This is a common experience for people with ADHD, is that it has to fit in a yes or no box. Either you've go home or go hard, or, you know, either it's 100% perfect or you have failed. But perfectionism doesn't exist. Nothing is perfect in this world. So you are putting these very high standards for yourself. Number two is the expert. You feel like you should know everything. And if you don't, you think you're not smart enough. I will say that as a personal example, I struggle with the expert. So I recognize that as your host, as an expert in ADHD, I will say, I will use the term expert lightly, because who am I to say I'm an expert? That's that imposter phenomenon coming out, right? So I recognize that I don't have ADHD. So sometimes I think to myself, like, who do I think I am trying to work with a specific community that I don't identify with? I cannot fully understand the experience. So I go above and beyond to do my research, to attend trainings and webinars, to be able to ensure that I know everything that I can to learn about ADHD, so that the information that I bring to this podcast, the information that I use to work with my clients in therapy, in the workshops that I give, are up to date and as accurate as can be, because I sometimes struggle that I'm not I'm not that I'm not smart enough. I know I work really hard, but I overdo it, because I'm like, I have to be an expert because I don't know the experience myself. I can't speak from personal experience. I have a certain level of privilege. So that's a little example about myself. Number three, the soloist. You believe you should do everything on your own, and asking for help feels like failing. When you think about your experiences, especially not only with ADHD, but adding the layer of possibly being a daughter of immigrants, because I am one, or being a person of color where often you've been the eldest sibling and you've had to grow up fast, the soloist may creep up because you have often had to do things for others all the time. And so then that registers in your brain as an adult that you should be able to do everything on your own. Number four, the natural genius. If something is hard or takes time to learn, you feel like you're not good enough. And number five, the superhuman. You think you should be great at everything. You got to be great at work. You got to be socializing, submitting things on time, getting good reviews. You also got to be able to go back home to your family and have the energy to interact with them and listen and play with your kids and spend quality time with your hubby. Then you also got hobbies. You want to be able to socialize. You got to have friends. And so then if you feel like you want to be 100% in all of these areas, you're going to struggle and you're going to feel like you're not good enough. But you're going to continue to strive to be good enough because in your head, you're like, I have to be. That's the superhuman. Can you see yourself in one of these? If you do, you are not alone. This list exists because there are so many people out there who experience it. So is imposter phenomenon just low confidence then? Is it that you just got to increase your confidence? Not really. So with confidence, it fluctuates, and we have confidence in different areas of our life that fluctuates. Everybody has doubts about stuff sometimes, but imposter phenomenon is different because even when people with imposter phenomenon succeed, they get that degree, they get that certificate, they get that compliment, they don't believe they deserve it. You may brush it off and think, if only they knew the truth, or they don't really mean that. They're just saying that to be nice. But the truth is, you are capable. And maybe you're just having a hard time seeing it. Now, when you think about imposter phenomenon, it really is about what are these thoughts that are creeping up in your head? What is the narrative that you are telling yourself? Are you saying things like, I should never make mistakes? I have to do great. I have to always know the answer. I should do everything on my own. I should be able to do it all. These kinds of thoughts are impossible. No one can follow that 100% of the time. But when people fall short, what happens? You're going to feel ashamed. When you feel ashamed, you start to criticize yourself. Then you start to bring yourself down. Then you start to stress yourself out. And stress will impact both your mind and your body. So I want y'all to be mindful of how you talk to yourself. How are ADHD and imposter phenomenon connected? Well, if you have ADHD, you may have struggled with school growing up, or maybe you didn't. There's also people who have ADHD with really high IQs. And so they end up learning very quickly and they kind of coast in school because that's how they end up with a late diagnosis of ADHD because they were so smart. So if maybe it was in school, maybe you were struggling at work, maybe you've noticed time management has been hard because all of a sudden life has gotten busier as an adult. Maybe now you have kids, a partner. Maybe people have criticized you for being too much or not trying hard enough, or if only you would apply yourself. Over time, that can make you feel like you're not smart or capable as others, even when you are. And then this can lead to some experiences with ADHD is having social anxiety, struggling with perfectionism because of the black and white thinking of either like go hard or go home, either you do great or you don't do it at all. Rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is when criticism feels really painful. You feel really sensitive to rejection. All of these things are going to make the imposter phenomenon worse. So how do we get through it, y'all? Because imposter phenomenon is going to creep up whether we like it or not. And so there's some ways to quiet this voice in our heads that tell us that we are not good enough or that we have to be an expert. And so one of the ways is challenging your thoughts. When you feel guilty and think, I don't deserve this. I waited until the last minute to submit this. I barely edited it. And my boss is telling me I did a great job. They don't even know. Challenge those thoughts. Is that really true? Just because you waited till the last minute doesn't mean that it's crappy work. To you, it may look like crappy work because you think, if I would have worked on this sooner and actually not stressed myself out, maybe I would have done a great job and reached my full potential. That's okay. That's where maybe getting some support for time and energy management will be helpful. Also, be mindful of the way you talk to yourself. Those shoulds and have tos, erase that from your vocabulary and replace it with would and could. So instead of saying, I should do better, I should never make mistakes, I could do better, I would like to make less mistakes, or mistakes help me grow. Reframe it whatever way that works best for you. Number 3, accept compliments. Instead of brushing them off, say thank you and let yourself believe it. I'll share with y'all a quick example. The other day, my friend was complimenting this podcast, saying that it's a great podcast. What did I say? I didn't say thank you. I said, you're just saying that to be nice because you're my friend. See, I struggle with it too, y'all. Number 4, find a support system. Talk to friends, mentors, or a therapist who can remind you how great you are. Because in those moments where self-criticism is starting to come up and imposter phenomenon you're starting to feel it, we need to balance out those thoughts. It could be true that maybe you would like to make less mistakes. Okay, that you are a work in progress, and also balance that out with some positive thoughts. And sometimes it's really hard to do that on your own. That's why you want to be intentional with who you surround yourself with and choose friends and mentors and a therapist who you feel like is supportive, is going to help you in those tough moments. And number 5, celebrate your wins. Celebrate the small ones. I often think that we wait till big ones show up and we disregard the small wins, the progress that's getting us to the big win. Every success counts no matter how small. Even if it's that you finished 3 out of 5 things from your to-do list today, that's a celebration in itself. I'm not saying go get yourself a trophy for it. I'm saying be proud of yourself, compliment yourself in that moment, because you may not have gotten 5 out of 5, but you got 3 out of 5, and that is better than 0. One other way you can do this is creating a win jar or a win wall. So you can put your successes so that you can look at it later on, because we forget about the successes in our lives. One final thought. Imposter phenomenon can be tough, but it doesn't have to control you. You are not a fraud. You are capable. You are worthy, and you are deserving of success just as you are, because we are all imperfect human beings who are a work in progress, and that is enough to celebrate. Next time that little voice in your head is trying to tell you that you're not good enough or that you need to do better, remind yourself that you are doing your best. Your best is amazing, and that is all that matters, even if your best looks different every day. Thank you for listening to me today. And if this episode helped you out, share it with a friend. Please subscribe, leave a review. That is going to be one of the best ways you can support this podcast to keep going. And I'll see you next time.